Well, coming into open session out of executive, and we will go ahead and jump on to Linden Plant, Steve McDonald. How you guys doing? We got one item, forestry up first. Looking up that audio, okay. Where's Lyndon and Steve at? Out in the field somewhere? Must be in Camas Prairie or up in Evero in the woods. All right, Lyndon, go ahead. Lyndon, can you hear us?
Oh, we good?
Go ahead.
All right, we'll start over. Sorry about that. Linden Plant representing Travel Forestry. I have Shannon Wagner, who's a travel member, asking for an extension on his contract. In Silo, 43 acres due to unforeseen circumstances such as bad weather, breakdown and injury. Shannon will like to extend his cut and pay date into August 31st, 2023, and his contract until October 31st, 2023. I think that's what we have today, and see what you guys feel about that, I guess.
Any council discussion on the request? It's your recommendation, Lyndon, to extend the contract?
Yes, it's our recommendation to extend the contract. I think Shannon has been working for us for a long time doing this, and I think it's just one of those things that happen every once in a while.
Tom,
Go ahead, Jen.
I received a resolution from them, so it's going to be by resolution approval.
Okay. Motion by Mike to approve the resolution approving the modification of Silo Liberation Cut logging unit by extending the date to October 31st, 2023.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Yep, Ellie?
I was just providing a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Ellie, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Show of hands. Unanimous.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right. Brian. Troy. Troy, you were just here. Did you win the race? I want to know.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for fitting us in for this morning. We're here for a number of reasons. One, most importantly to you, is to submit to you the second half of our dividend declaration that we had earlier this year in January. But a spoiler alert, I wanted to let you all know that back in January, I remember speaking to Chad Coddett before coming in to see you back then, and he said, tell them at least 10 times, no, maybe 20, that don't expect a check of this size for their following year. But I'm happy to report to all of you, year to date, we are actually top end revenue ahead of last year. And net income just 3% behind, which is accountable for the fact that we gave a 12% across the board wage increase to the SNK Gaming employees. And also had tourist season inducements to help generate more employees, which has been a real challenge, I'm sure, not just for SNK Gaming, but also with the other corporations in the local area. So things have gone very well on that front. And so I'm happy to report that I think we'll be able to hit close to what we did last year without all the stimulus money. So clearly we were wrong in our assessment, and the revenues have never been higher in the history of the company. So it's really nice to see. And then also I wanted to give the council a reminder that back in April 5th of this year, you submitted a letter to the governor's office. They, by NIGA or IGA status, we don't use under the, I'm sorry, IGRA status, the Indian Gaming Act. They have 6 months to respond. We are at month 5, so they have roughly 4 weeks to respond to that letter. Just so you know, after 6 months, you're able to go to the Department of the Interior and start secretarial procedures and be able to go through the Department of the Interior for a compact through them, which I would assume with Deb Halen at the head of that organization, I think would actually bode well for us. So to my knowledge, Tom, I have not heard anything from the governor's office. So we'll see what happens come October 5th and leave that to your capable hands. So
Appreciate those updates. You know what? We'll go into official shareholder meeting status at this point in time. For SNK Gaming. And before you go any further, I want to, we do have minutes before us. If you looked at the minutes, we could, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of December 2nd, 2021. Motion by Mike. Second by Jimmy. Any further discussion? All those in favor, show of hands. Okay, I'll let them know. Unanimous? Okay, and I want to know, I'm glad you're reporting what you're reporting, because my losses, personal losses, have been the greatest they've ever been.
we credit you and your wife.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. That back at me.
I do want to also mention something that I forgot. In our loan portfolio, we had a total of 4 loans, and we, as the board, gave authority to Brian to pay off one of the 4 loans early for Big Arm. We have that check with us today to pay that off back to the tribes. Of the 3 remaining, I believe we decided to fold one of the 3 into one of the other loans, and we'll have 2. So things have, you know, we're doing so well that it's allowing us to improve our cash flow by paying off some of these loans early. So that's been a real positive for the corporation. So
Super. Good to hear. All good news.
yeah, it's been quite the ride.
All
Are
right.
there any questions before we'd like to present you with the check?
No, I just another personal note. I want to thank you for at Grey Wolf. Because the bar moved, I'm getting more exercise.
We hope to come up with a solution for that. And I should mention that several weeks ago, we had the grand opening for Lassaw's restaurant. We did invite Buzzy Lassaw, Nick Lassaw's daughter, to the event. I know Jimmy was there, and being excellent turnout. And Tom, of course, was there. And I think you made a contribution that night too afterwards.
I did, but I did win some golf clubs.
Nice.
And it got me 2 whole prizes at the College Foundation. It's like phenomenally hit the ball. It's amazing.
But I'll welcome any questions. And what I'd like to do is we have a check here. We'd like to get a photograph presenting that to the chairman and the rest of council. So
All right, it looks
How'd
like
the
a lot of
rodeo go?
materials. Go ahead,
it's
Carol.
for 3.4.
How'd the rodeo go, Troy?
I'm sorry.
Say it again, Carol.
Oh,
How did the rodeo go?
this was as far as I know, in terms of entries go, as far as actual participants, it is the second largest of any of the ones that we've held. The revenues are, I'm sorry, the net profit picture is still being sorted out. But it looked like Friday we did extremely well, and Saturday was even more well attended. And obviously the beer garden made a large contribution. I'll just leave it at that. And but did extremely well, better than the year before. One of the changes that we did, and I know I've had discussions with Bing about this, is we really tasked Sheila and her team with getting more sponsors. And basically the board's position was, when we restarted the rodeo last year, was that we would be willing to do this provided that sponsorship efforts were made a huge priority. She came through with I think just north of $40,000 in sponsorships. Previous to that, gaming basically just relied on I think a number of tribal departments. That was about the extent of their efforts. I had a conversation with Dorothy Klinkenbeard, who had a lot of years of experience running the Mule Palace, and they said, you got to beat the bushes, and there's corporate sponsorships that are out there. So it's made a big difference to the bottom line. So I've been real pleased with that.
Troy, I want to thank you guys for honoring Anita, our colleague at the event. I wasn't there, but I heard it went really well. And I know her family just felt just elated by, having that opportunity.
Yeah, Len did a really nice speech and really had shared some good anecdotes about Anita, and there was a moment of silence that was given during the rodeo, so everyone stood and observed. So it was yeah, I agree, Carol. It was heartfelt. So
Thank you. All right, let's take a look at that
all right.
poster board you got there.
Okay, guys. Yeah, go around. Hurry up. You can stay up there. I'll get you first, and then you can take it. Sure. Come on, guys. Ryan, you, and then you can come take your picture.
The casino, don't get any picture. I'm just kidding.
Squeeze in there. Everybody say money.
What do you say, jackpot?
Okay, Brian.
I'm ducked out. I can get back to Yeah, I'll just take that check right.
I can't get that. Anybody want to move it?
Lemleps. All right, who's up next? Where's my agenda? There it is. Kate Wilson, okay. Kate, there you are. Good to see you again.
Mr. Chairman, you going back into regular session?
Yeah, regular session. We're out of the shareholders into the regular session.
We do have some slides, so let me get those up for you.
You mind me?
we'll have Martin come help you. Yes, we do.
Today, there we go. My name is Kate Wilson. I manage the Flathead Basin Commission and work for Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, DNRC. And I would like to introduce all of us because we're going to kind of share this presentation. So I'll move to Casey.
I'm Casey Lewis. I work for the City of Kalispell as Environmental Coordinator, but I also serve as the current Vice Chair for Flathead Basin Commission. Also on the Executive Committee, On-Site Wastewater Treatment Committee, and Education Outreach Committee.
Good morning. My name is Emily Henry. I am the non-point source coordinator for the Flathead Basin Commission.
Good morning. My name is Mike Copel. I'm the Executive Director of the Whitefish Lake Institute, but I also volunteer for the Flathead Basin Commission by chairing their on-site wastewater treatment committee and their technical committee.
All right, so we thought if we had more than one speaker, it would keep the presentation riveting. So we really wanted to come today to just say hello, to introduce ourselves, to talk about some of the work we've been doing in the Flathead, and then share a couple projects and products that we thought you might be interested in some potential partnership opportunities there. So first, I'd like to start by just thanking you for your long-term service to the Flathead Basin Commission. Since 1983, the tribe's had a seat at the table, and Rich Jansen has been doing a really good job representing you, and he's currently our chair of the commission. So I know he was at a Def Leppard concert, or else he would be here.
We always knew there was something wrong with him.
Yeah, yep, well, there it is. Uh-oh, there we go, okay. All right, so since 1983, when the Montana State Legislature created the Basin Commission, we have been working on natural resource issues, mostly focused on water quality. And I'm sure you all know this, but just in case anyone's not familiar, just wanted to provide that kind of high level, here's what we do. And we are administratively attached to DNRC, so the board kind of functions independently, but staff are provided by the department and all of the kind of overhead services that we benefit from. As you know, the basin includes 2 counties and the reservation, so we have some complexity in terms of jurisdictional boundaries. And we currently have 3 staff, so this is more than ever. There was some tumultuous times, I'll say, when I first took over around 2017. And I'm really happy to report that not only has our funding been restored, but we're really back to our original mission. And that's what we're going to focus on talking about today. And we've been able to add Emily as a new staffer. We've never had that position before to focus on non-point source pollution in the basin. So very exciting times. The commission's comprised of about 23 members, pretty diverse, and half roughly are political appointees of the governor and half are what I call self-selected. So for example, the tribe gets to choose who represents them on the commission, as do both counties. And I'm not going to read this to you, don't worry, but our statutory duties are really laid out fairly clearly. There's some in there that are a little nebulous, and we just kind of figure it out as we go. Really focused on monitoring the conditions of the basin, building and facilitating positive relationships, building a bridge to Canada, no big deal, and ensuring public participation when it comes to emerging threats or long-term issues that affect the basin. And we're non-regulatory in nature, so we can recommend things, we can suggest, but we can't actually make rules. Okay, and then really focusing on kind of how we ended up here. As you know, the Basin Commission's done some pretty great things over the last almost 40 years, including the moratorium on coal mining in the headwaters, a lot of great work on aquatic invasive species prior to the detection of larvae in the 2 reservoirs. That resulted in the standing up of a new commission, which Commissioner Sharla is on, the Upper Columbia Conservation Commission, UC3. So myself and one other staff member actually manage both of those commissions, like there wasn't enough to do. So that's really focused on aquatic invasive species. And at that point, the Basin Commission decided, hey, water quality issues are never going away. Non-point source issues are particularly troublesome because there's no point source to point out, there's no pipe, to point to. So things like septic leachate, stormwater runoff, agricultural runoff are really the areas that we've been focusing in the last 5 years. We've done a few strategic planning sessions now, and just about a month ago, decided, you know what, this work is really important. We're going to continue to focus on non-point source pollution. So with that, cue the poop jokes, because we're going to talk about septic leachate for a while. And also, Chairman McDonald, really want to thank you for coming to the workshop and giving that opening. We'll kind of cover what the outcomes of that were today, but it's a really important issue affecting the basin. And just for kind of problem statement wise, about a quarter of all the households in the United States are on some kind of on-site wastewater treatment system, so not on sewer. Just for the sake of not saying that on-site wastewater so many times, I'm just going to call them septic systems. And we know that about a third of all new construction in the US is not in urban areas. So there's no city services, and they're going to be on wells and septics. We also know that about half of these in the entire country are over 30 years old, which is about the life of a newer system. And EPA conservatively estimates that at least 20% are not functioning properly. So that means they're not treating the waste to the best of their ability. And in studies across the country, failure due to inadequate maintenance is suggested to be much higher than that 20%. So 30 to 50% in Missouri, 60% in West Virginia, 50 to 70% in Minnesota, the land of lakes, no less, and up to 70% in Indiana. So we also know that groundwater contamination, so individual wells, surface waters that they're connected to, really septic systems contaminate just almost as much as industrial pollution when it comes to groundwater and individual private wells. So that's a pretty big concern for public health, water quality, and even, consumer protection. When people buy a home, if their septic isn't in good working order, they may not know that. And here in Montana, we've known since the 70s that there is issues with septic leachate pollution in all of our lakes. So there's been studies in Lake McDonald, Lake Mary Ronan, Whitefish Lake, and Flathead demonstrating that there's wastewater in our lakes, rivers, and streams that is not being treated. So we know it's an issue, and unfortunately, in the last 50-ish years, we haven't done much to address the problem. But I will say that Montana actually stacks up pretty well when it comes to design standards. So new systems that get permitted have to meet a minimum standard that's set by Department of Environmental Quality. We do pretty well with that. But what it doesn't consider is how many septics are already in that area. And it doesn't require that once that system is in the ground, any maintenance has to be done. Right? So unless a county or a tribe decides that they want to do more than that minimum, that's all that's required across the state. And unfortunately, when you buy a home, it's not even required that the septic permit be part of that package that you get, or that an inspection or pumping would be done. So we're concerned that there's a lot of old septic systems in the basin that may be really problematic for water quality. And here in Montana, we know that close to 50% of our population is on some kind of decentralized system. So not hypothetical. And we also know that education alone doesn't really get us there, right? So not only do, septic systems are fairly complex in nature, and we got a lot of new residents moving into the basin who may not even know that they're on a septic or what that means, right? And so we feel like education certainly has to be part of any solution, but alone, it's just not going to get us where we need to go. And so to date, only a handful of counties across the entire state have chose to do something above that state minimum, which really only addresses design, like I said before. And that's Lewis and Clark County, Missoula County, and Flathead County does require a pressure dose system, so smaller pipes. We can go into the details if you want, but I would just kind of close that problem statement with, in this water-rich, economically important, and rapidly growing Flathead Basin, poorly sited, aging, underperforming, and failing septics pose a very real risk to water quality. So that's why we ended up here today. For about the last 5 years, we've really focused on this particular issue. And so some of the work that we've done includes a pretty active on-site wastewater treatment committee that Mike's the chair of. And this was really the foundation of the risk map that we're going to showcase today. And we tried very hard to get diverse representation on that committee so that we would understand, if there were a, say, legislative solution, why would people be opposed, or why would they be concerned about something we might move forward, so we really understand all of the perspectives that are out there. And we also are part of what we're calling the Flathead Basin Wastewater Partnership. So right now in the basin, DEQ and ourselves are funding septic maintenance reimbursement program. So folks that need to get their septic pumped are eligible for up to half off of that, which is about $200 if you meet certain criteria. So that's been pretty successful, and a way to really kind of individually show people the connection between their individual behavior in their house and how that connects to water quality in the larger basin. We also were a partner in this National Science Foundation workshop that was held in June that I mentioned earlier, and some really interesting stuff came out of that. We had scholars and researchers and sanitarians and legislators and all kinds of folks attend and just really dig into this issue and talk about emerging technology, where we might be able to do better to get a handle on how bad it is now and how we do better in the future. And then finally, I'm going to turn it over to Mike for this, but what we're really showcasing to you today is a risk model that we've developed, and we've partnered that with a synthetic DNA study in a couple key locations to validate that model. And this tool is really intended to be, helping to shape future growth in areas that we are less vulnerable, and also to show us where the septics are now that could be problematic based on physical characteristics and age. So I will now turn it over to Mike.
Good to see you again, Mike.
Good to see you, Tom. Yeah.
Mike and I and Kate go way back.
So good morning. I'd like to run you through this GIS risk model. And we feel that it's a good planning tool as we look at growth and development in the basin. I think it's something that your planners and managers can use to help guide their decision making. It's comprised of two main components. One is a physical risk assessment, and the other would be the actual septic density overlay with age classes. So we don't have all the data for the South Basin. In the North Basin, we do have everything to produce an overall risk assessment map, but I'm going to run you through those this morning. So can we turn this a little bit? Just like, thanks. So with the physical risk map, there are four main components or risk factors that we looked at. They include the soil suitability. So basically the ability of nutrients to move through soil. And nutrients are important because we don't want those in our waterways, right? They're typically the limiting factor for algal production. So things like nitrogen, phosphorus are those things that we want to keep out of the water beyond background natural levels. We looked at depth to groundwater because, of course, if you have high groundwater, that increases the risk of transport of septic effluent to, further down into people's drinking water wells or to surface water. We looked at slope. Obviously, it's less ideal to build a septic system on a slope versus flat ground. And then ultimately, we looked at the distance to surface water so that we have an idea about the potential breakout of nutrients and human pathogens to our water bodies. So we're going to show you data here for the South Basin, just so you have an idea of what it looks like. And these, I'm not going to drill down into the details and bore you guys here with the specifics, but if you do have any technical questions, I'm happy to answer those for you. So basically, each layer was rated from low to high in its potential to impact water quality on the basis of septic placement. On the left, you can see the groundwater layer and see where here in the South Basin that we do have some groundwater, higher groundwater areas than others. The soil suitability layer takes into account, again, both nitrogen and phosphorus and their ability to move through the soil particles to water bodies. And then you guys probably know where all the surface water is, but it's mapped out here because it's a layer in the model itself. And then the slope layer looks a little different down in the South Basin just because we have a more mountainous area influencing that particular layer. So ultimately, all of these were combined or mashed together, if you will, to produce an overall physical risk model for the South Basin. And so this basically tells us where we should, in general, be looking at where not to place additional septics or to think twice as we go towards development densities and so forth, so that we are not impacting groundwater or surface water. So again, I think it's a great tool for your planners to use this physical risk model as a broad brushstroke in the office before they drill down on site specifics. So in the North Basin, we had the data from Flathead County to create a septic density and age class overview. So this would be the second component of the model. And so in Flathead County, we have 24,415 septics on the landscape. And that's from the time period of 1978 to 2020. We don't have data after that currently, and we don't have data prior to 1978 when septic permits were required. But if you look just in that time period, in 2020, roughly a third of those septic systems are 30 years of age or older. And as Kate mentioned, we're concerned that septics of that age are underperforming or not adequately treating septic leachate. And we are getting those things we don't want, such as nutrients and pathogens breaking out to our waters. We also projected going to 2030 based on past growth rates. Doesn't take into account the COVID influx here of the last couple of years, but and so what we're forecasting is that in about 8 years, darn near half the septic systems will be 30 years of age or older. So they're in high risk categories. So this is getting into some of the weeds. I'm gonna kind of go through this quickly, but the purpose of this slide is just to demonstrate that this is kind of a coarse layer look at the valley, and that this wasn't intended to be a site-specific tool. So if there's a development proposal for a specific, small area, then that's not the applicability of this particular model. So ultimately, this would be the final map that we came up with, which combines both the physical risk assessment layer with the existing septic density and age class layer. And you can see in the North Valley there where we currently today have potential issues with aging septic infrastructure on the landscape. And this model is based on publicly available information. And so there's some questions on just how credible the data is. And what I look at specifically is Whitefish Lake, where we've conducted a septic leachate investigation. And the red areas that are highlighted on this risk model directly correlate with the findings that we found in the water itself in Whitefish Lake. So it provides me confidence that we have a pretty accurate model here going forward. So we would like to do this in the South Basin to add to that physical risk layer if we can, in order to produce this overall existing septic risk model. So of course, we don't have the data prior to 1978, which is an issue. And so Emily sent out a survey to those parcel owners that were identified through a search with the state cadastral system. And we estimate that there's between 5,000 and 6,000 additional septics on the landscape in Flathead County. So if you go back to that pie chart that I showed earlier, the wedge of pie, for those aging septic systems is misrepresented most likely, and that those pieces of the pie are actually much larger. So
I remember at the Flathead Lakers, Phil Jackson was a guest speaker, and he talked about when he bought his house on Flathead Lake, and the guy that owned a gas station, and the septic system was a 55-gallon oil drum.
Yeah,
and a pipe going in the lake.
Yeah, we still hear some stories about those today. So moving on, I just wanted to highlight a study going on currently at Whitefish Lake and Lake Mary Ronan, which is a synthetic DNA tracer study. So when we go to sample lakes for septic leachate indicators, we can determine if there is septic influence. However, we don't have a good way of source tracking, so we can't really tell where that septic leachate is coming from. And the synthetic DNA provides some exciting technology to do that source tracking. So what it amounts to is synthetically derived DNA produced in the lab at Cornell University. They just use about 500 base pairs. And if you think about the human genome, we have about 3.2 million base pairs. So it's just a small snippet. They encase that snippet in a biodegradable polymer, just like if you go to the hospital and get sutures, they dissolve over time. And so it doesn't persist in the environment. So we introduce those tracers into people's toilets and flush it down. And then we start filling up bottles from the lake. And so that, again, we don't have the results back from Cornell, but we're excited to see, number one, the efficacy of the technique in a lake environment. We know it works in streams and rivers down in Georgia. The other thing is we want to calibrate and validate that GI risk model via information that we get back from this synthetic DNA study. I'm also part of the NSF team with some University of Montana researchers, and they're also interested in this topic, and the results from that NSF Smart and Connected Communities grant will help the Flathead Basin Commission. The results will go back to the on-site wastewater treatment committee to help in our overall management report that we hope to put out in 2023. As Kate mentioned, we held a 3-day workshop in June where we brought in natural resource scientists from around the country, social scientists, community leaders. And I thought we should lock them in a room until they came up with ideas to fix the problem. But of course, it just spurred more conversation And, it is a very complex socio-cultural issue. The science is there, whereas we know that we have a problem, but, crossing that social hurdle proves more problematic and difficult. So we had the workshop. Other aspects of the grant are to look at a shoreline remote sensing project coupled with microbial testing. Dr. Matt Church is conducting that. Ultimately, we're trying to find technologies that can inform us on the subject, such as remote sensing, that can be scalable, not only here in the basin, but for the state of Montana and beyond. And then some of the team will be looking at policies and regulations from other locales to inform us here to see what worked there or what works and what doesn't work, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. These are just some survey results. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but of perceived impacts from the workshop participants. And it kind of highlights that, a lot of them thought that septic leachate could potentially impact our economy. Kate mentioned that, and why would that be? It's because of those nutrients that could break out into our water bodies, driving algal production, at which point water clarity goes down. And we know we have economic studies that tie water clarity to property values, right? When water clarity goes down, property values go down, as does the local tax base. Other things from the survey, the participants understood that septic leachate can affect aquatic life, most certainly in that shoreline area, but certainly it can affect our recreational opportunities and our drinking water, since many people still derive their drinking water directly from our lakes. Okay, and that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, so back to me for where we go from here. So I just want to start with, the Basin Commission is really committed to using the best available science, data, and technology. And you see this reflected in the risk map. It's all written up in a really nice report. Our consultant's actually online today. If we had any really tough questions, we thought that'd probably be good to have him, and he did a great job. So this report will be on our website, and really the plan for that map is to be publicly available on our website, ideally used by planners, environmental health, when they're thinking about issuing permits, but also for the public. So if you're concerned about your own area, or you want to dig a little deeper in one of the layers, we'll kind of go into what the plan is for that in just a few minutes. We're also committed to exploring and implementing where possible the recommendations that came out from that 3-day workshop. There's some really good ideas in there, as Mike was discussing earlier. Once the synthetic DNA study is completed, we're interested in potentially doing it in some other places where we know we may have high risk areas, and ideally even developing that technology so we can use local folks like the biostation instead of Cornell University in New York for various reasons. And we also really want to address data gaps. So as Mike was saying, the only reason we could do that kind of second level of analysis on the map is because Flathead County has a publicly available online permit database. So you can see all of the permits that are issued, and that allowed us to do everything from, the age weighted density that Mike showed, and also where there are unpermitted systems. So it's a really important piece that we haven't been able to complete here in the South Basin. I also am going to be working on an analysis of options for our on-site wastewater treatment committee. So this will include, what suite of legislative rule and ordinance options exist to address this problem. What kinds of outreach and education can we do? What are the financial barriers and how can we better address those on a municipal level, on a private landowner level. There just aren't a lot of options to help people right now. So there's really that septic reimbursement pumping program that I mentioned earlier, and 2 grants that are really limited in scope and pretty specific to like failing systems. And wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to go there, right? And if a system didn't fail, we could fix it before that happened. I think also just recognizing the growth that's happening in the basin. We're really focused on that. Our next meeting for the Basin Commission in October, we'd like to have a panel on growth and development and some of the pieces and challenges that kind of puts pressure on. And of course, we want to see municipalities and yourselves, if possible, use the risk tool to serve your own protection of water quality and way of life. And with that, I think I want to share with you a fun personal case study. So we're really laser focused on this issue, and it started to occur to me that I had this kind of irony where my grandfather was an excavator, installed a lot of septics, had a lot of strong opinions about how their efficacy, and he believed that if you installed it correctly with the right system in the right place, you never had to go back and pump it, inspect it, clean it, or replace it. And bless his soul, he passed, and my dad, a very crafty fella, inherited those beliefs. So this is our summer cabin in northeastern Washington, and it took me 3 years to convince my dad that I'll pay for it. I just want to know what it looks like. This system's over 25 years old, and I'm happy to report about 10 days ago when I was home for vacation, he said yes, and I got the guy out. He said it wasn't the worst he had seen. Interestingly, he had only seen one other model like that, also installed by my grandfather. And, he said, maybe don't wait 25 years this time, but it just really gave me a good perspective for how difficult this issue is and how everyone has their own kind of perception about what's needed and how important it is and how it affects your neighbors and your lake and your community. So our septic's clean now, and hopefully it will last a good long time. It's, seasonal use. It's kind of a different recommendation than folks who live there year round, but it was a really good place for me to focus and think of some new ideas and how convincing I could be for why this is important.
I'm so glad you're able to break that generational paradigm.
Right? Yeah. And I was also, because I was like, why is he so resistant? Do we not have a permit or something? And it turns out we do. So that was also really good to know. And I think that pumper that showed up probably never had a client that was that interested in what he was doing. And I gave him all these like stickers, and I got some for you too. And I'm like, make sure to put that on your truck, and there's a lot of big issues about it, like where haulers can take the septage. That's also a massive problem here in the basin too. And so really, digging deeper is where we need to go next. So for you today, I think, we wanted to share what we're doing and let you know that we're here to support you. And if you are willing, sharing that permit database with us would allow us to go to that second tier risk map. And we have, thank you for, your staff has been participating on the onsite committee. We had some maybe miscommunication about what would be needed if we either sent a person to help digitize the data, get it in a database for you, and then we could use it for the map, and then you would have all those records digitized for safekeeping and just maintenance records in the future. But also we could fund the rest of that model so that it would be more useful to you, and you could see kind of where there may be issues on the ground right now versus where we might want to avoid permitting new septics in the future. So that's kind of the focus of what we could do to take this to the next level. Also, your participation in that October Flathead Basin Commission meeting would be greatly appreciated. Maybe like planning director sort of thing to talk about what kind of growth you're seeing and where it's going, and any concerns that you have with the influx of people that we're seeing. We also have a campaign that we're launching, Montana Waters, and that Casey's going to talk about in just a minute, but it's pretty exciting. And I think a different way to engage people in these kind of difficult issues. So with that, I will turn it to Emily to talk about the plan for the map. So what is it? How are you going to access it from here on out? Thank you.
All right, so on the screen here is kind of the draft form of what this map looks like. And so obviously in that big, large area there, you see the those physical risk layers for both the North and South Basin. And then overlaid on top of that in the North Basin is that existing septic risk. So that's the layer that takes into account the already aging and the density of septic systems on the landscape. And so this will be ideally an online publicly available tool that anybody can access. We're hoping that planning departments and decision makers like yourselves will utilize this tool to inform future development, kind of make decisions about where development goes moving forward. So on the right side here, this panel, my vision for this is that it will have all of the layers that went into creating that physical risk. So the groundwater, the slope, you'd be able to see all of them. The names of the layers would be listed there. There would be a brief description about what the data shows, where it came from. And then when you clicked on them, it would pop up on the map and you could really do some investigation. You'd be able to scroll in, zoom in, see the different area you're looking at. And then up in the right corner, I'm envisioning a link to what I'm calling a new user guide. And this would be more for the public side. So it would really walk folks through what septic systems are, how they impact water quality, and then ultimately really dive deep into how the data was processed, exactly where it came from, being as transparent as possible and showcasing that publicly available data. And so this tool clearly is still in a draft form. And so the reason that we're bringing it to you now is we'd really like your input on this. If there's anything that we can add to the tool to make it more useful for you, or if you have any concerns, we would love to hear them as we kind of move forward with this. So now I'm going to totally switch gears. And while we have you guys in the room, we also want to give a really brief overview of some other stuff that we're working on. So for, obviously non-point source pollution is a big concern for the Basin Commission. And one form of non-point source pollution is through stormwater pollution. And so that's been a big focus for us. Over the past couple of years, we developed an inventory of stormwater infrastructure in those key urban areas in the basin, both through accessing data that has already been digitized by municipalities, or conducting these citizen science outreach events, mapping events in areas that did not have their data digitized. And I'm going to breeze through this because it can get kind of intense, but ultimately what this just shows is where infrastructure exists, who owns it, and where it's discharging into surface water. And then from that inventory, we were able to really create this model and try to identify where those high risk areas are for stormwater pollution. And that really takes into account these different characteristics of those subbasins. And we can dive more into this if you want to, but I know we're short on time. So I think I'm going to just breeze on ahead. The future work of this program, we want to use that model. We want to use the inventory and ultimately make changes, both retroactively through these different BMPs that we can install in those high priority subbasins, that can treat for different types of pollutants, but then also thinking, more forward thinking proactively with how can we incentivize using green stormwater infrastructure alternatives in future development. And these would be more infiltration based and would treat for different types of pollutants. With that, I'll pass it off to Casey to talk about education outreach.
Thank you.
So last but not least, I'll move this over so we can see. We recognize with septic leachate, stormwater pollution, all these non-point source pollution issues, they're not always the easiest to communicate with the public, help those understand what they can do and why it's a problem, where it goes, because it's not quite as visible as other pollution issues. So through our education outreach committee, we decided to create a water quality campaign and brand a very recognizable logo. So it's appealing, people are interested, want to put the stickers or the brand on different pieces. And then tie in all these water quality issues, non-point source pollution issues under that. And so we brought together over 50 partners in the entire basin for a larger group, and then had a subcommittee. And we came to the conclusion of Montana Waters, clearly connected, and you see the logo on the tablecloth there. And you'll get to see some more when Kate passes out some goodies after this. And that the brand itself was, the idea is that all partners can use the Montana Waters logo and marketing however they see fits for their programs. So we aren't trying to redo any of the existing programs, but kind of creating that umbrella that all these great programs can fall under and have one highly recognizable logo. So just making it easier and understandable for the public and members to tie to these non-point source pollution issues. So from there, there's a lot of programs that are starting to fall under and collaborate with Montana Waters, including the septic maintenance reimbursement program that Kate's already discussed. There's going to be a Living in the Flathead guide that will be coming out on sustainable living in the area, the NSF septic workshop, the pump party that is tonight, hosted by the Flathead Lakers, Flathead Basin Commission, and others. And then diving into specifically to a few other programs that fall under that, that we've worked on and helped collaborate with. One is the Flathead Rain Garden Initiative, which is a partnership between Flathead Conservation District, Flathead Basin Commission, and the city of Kalispell. And that's helping empower residents of Flathead County to build rain gardens on their private property. So helping reduce the amount of stormwater runoff getting into stormwater systems, but also treating the stormwater through the native plants and soil. And then a newly released one for City of Kalispell and Flathead Basin Commission is an Adopt a Drain program that encourages residents to adopt and take ownership of storm drains in their neighborhood and clean off any debris that builds up there. But also a big part of this program is the education and discussions that happen on where these storm drains go. So a lot of residents don't recognize that storm drains in the street typically run untreated to their local waters, lakes, rivers, and streams. So just that understanding of why we don't want to wash off any drywall material or pour car oil down those drains. And also why excess grass and leaves can be a pollutant in the end as well. And then also the annual Flathead Waters cleanup. And we just ran the second year of that, which was a huge hit. And it's volunteers from across the basin can volunteer to clean up any water body of their choice. And our results were great this year. There was over 210 volunteers, over 5,100 pounds of trash cleaned up from the water bodies, and over 140 miles of river and lakeshore improved through a one-day event. And we hold a great party and celebrate everyone's success and give out lots of great prizes. So all of these kind of fall under that Montana Waters umbrella program, and we're excited to see these programs moving forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
I guess before that, since we have Ryan Richardson on the line, is there anything you want to add about the map or anything else before we take questions?
Hey, Kate, thanks for asking. You guys did a great job with the presentation, so I don't think I have anything really to add except for I really love this project. I think it really goes a long way in terms of our understanding for septic systems in the Flathead Basin, and I'm happy to answer questions, technical questions offline and in this meeting about the model. So thanks again. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, I know that was a lot of information, so I think, yeah, questions, comments, suggestions, anything you want to do.
Okay, thank you. Not ready to sneeze, I'm sorry. It's not COVID.
Sure.
Sure. First of all, I want to ask the council members that are zooming in if they have any questions. Seeing none, any other comments or questions from council? Got me a COVID test there, okay. Just great subject matter. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It is very important. And I know we have our experts in the back there, Evan and Chauncey. I don't know if you have anything to add to the presentation or support thereof or the request.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of council. So I think we're kind of asking, we do have a database of scanned permit records, over 2,100 scans of the reservation. And those were done with, and I think Janet Camel was here. She helped initiate that in 2004. So I think there's a lot of.
Thank you. Kind of tall.
Not
So
as tall as your son.
I know, trying. I'll hit a growth spurt here soon. So I think what they're asking for is maybe that information from that database. And then there's also information, I think, with housing, having records right now, and maybe reaching out to them and seeing if we can get some of those records. And I think they're looking for a lot more with the lat longs, but we can, some of those records do have that information, some don't. So I think we working with them to get that information with council approval, I think would help with this database.
Thank you, Chauncey. Yeah, it's really a cumulative effects modeling, and you got to have the information. Of course, as Mike alluded to, there's all this information from before 1978 that's out there that are like Coach Jackson's situation when he bought his house in the early 70s, late 60s. I can't remember when it was, where there's a lot of those out there. It's incredible how many there are that are homemade type situations. But you got to have the best information to do the best modeling you can. Identify those high risk watersheds, rivers, lakes, etc. So I personally am in full support of acquiring the data necessary to complete the modeling and the mapping, to use it as a tool for land use planning. I don't know in Flathead County if they've been insightful enough, the commissioners, to be able to look at the data so far and help direct. Because right now, yeah, you're missing stuff from, how many people moved here the last 2 years is incredible. And the amount of people, the potential for that many more people moving here in the future is in our face. And so this is a tool we need now. We need to be able to use it in the entire watershed. And so it's very important. So I appreciate that. But just for the Flathead County, and what is the insight for the county commissioners? Is this going to be something they're going to employ?
Yeah, so we met with all three individually yesterday and went very well. Because their record database is already publicly available, we didn't really need to get their permission to do it. We work really closely with their environmental health folks and presented it to the planning staff as well on Tuesday. We're on a bit of a roadshow. And I think that they're interested in using it as a like initial screening tool for future development and then for septic permits as well. And I do want to note that, you know, because we don't have, like this went to 2020 and we know there's a lot of new folks that moved here, we're committed to evaluating that every couple years and updating the model as needed.
Good. Thank you, Kate. So we have a request, council, like to provide the data that we have to support this endeavor. Yeah. However you want to frame it.
All right, yeah, I'd make the motion to, I don't have it in front of me, to approve the collection permit or the use of data that we have on septic systems. Does that work, Chauncey?
First by Martin, second by Bing. Any further discussion? See none, all those in favor, show of hands. We have, let's see, 8-4, one out of the room, so got a golden thumbs up and great work. Oh, way to spoil us. Lemon. Thank you. Go ahead, Bing.
Where you guys go? I said, as I was talking to Martin over here, I said, is there any lagoon systems up there in Whitefish area or Kalispell area? Do you know of? We're just trying to think where there might be one up there and we just couldn't remember where, if there was one up there or where it was.
So Kalispell does not have a lagoon system and Whitefish used to, but they've just fairly recently updated their wastewater treatment system to not include lagoons, if I'm correct with that. Yeah, as far as I know.
So in the Kalispell area there, if they're not the lagoon system and there, all them homes up there have septic systems?
So the Kalispell has a wastewater treatment plant, but it is a microbial based and they don't have to do any of the drying lagoons with that. I'm not an expert at wastewater treatment by any means, so I can't talk fully into how that works, but as far as I know, that's not the type of system that they call it. But yeah, we do a microbial wastewater treatment and they treat all of Kalispell's and now Evergreens as well.
Yeah, a lot of them, you know, use an irrigation type system too, on top of their. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thanks for coming in. Jen? Okay, I have one, just want to let you know I'm going to be on personal leave on Tuesday, so I won't be here. I need to deal with a surgical item, so. Still have counsel? Yes, thank you. Evan, Chauncey, Kate, Mike. Okay, we're all adjourned for the day.